Today we have an exciting journey, joining Yoav and his brother Avishai into battle to save Am Yisrael. What started out as a simple gesture in hopes of creating good relations with our neighbor Ammon spirals out of control very quickly. Maybe Ammon was wary after seeing David taking over Moab, thinking that they may be next. They know they aren't strong enough to hold out against David, but devise a plan. They quickly call for help from Aram Beit Rehov of the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon and Aram Tzova in northern Damascus to come to their aid. Here we have to pause and ask who Aram is and why should they bother to come help Ammon? It's important to note that when we have second-rate powers such as the Plishtim, a strong Israel taking over surrounding areas, and Aram, the nations of Aram, that are on the rise, it means that there's some kind of crisis in the empires around us. It's not always clear to us looking back why these lulls appear, but these are the times when we tend to flourish and vie for control over the surrounding nations. And they, of course, try to do the same. Ancient Assyrian texts corroborate that by around the 10th century before the Common Era, the times of David HaMelech, the tribes of Aram in the region begin to form alliances and become more stable political entities. In general, in a sense similar to the Plishtim, Aram, the nations of Aram, are not one united nation, but a cohort of city-states spread throughout the region that bind together when needed, or at times may become subservient to one of the more powerful city-states, as is the case in our parak. Why might they want to help? If David has taken Moab and Ammon is next, it could well be that they're in line right after them. Interestingly, we don't actually have a clear indication that this was David's plan at all. This war was thrust upon him against Ammon, followed by repeated attacks by Aram, leading to the success that expanded our borders all the way to Nahar Prat, or the Euphrates. The self-fulfilling prophecy of Aram, while not part of David's intentions, was orchestrated by Hashem to allow David to succeed in his mission, as we read in Perek Chet, Pasuk Yud Dalet, Vayosha Hashem et David b'chol asher halach. Interestingly, this could all have been seen as a huge disaster and tremendous threat from the perspective of the locals and the armies in the field, not realizing that the war thrust upon them would end up being, in a sense, a huge blessing. A similar thing happened with the Six-Day War. Tens of thousands of graves were prepared in advance. No one could possibly have expected the incredible miracles that occurred and the unbelievable opportunities that presented themselves as we expanded and tripled the area under our control. Back to our battle. Yoav fell into the trap. He had come to lay siege to Rabbath Ammon, who moved to the gates prepared to attack, but was not prepared for the armies of the nations of Aram, who traveled down towards Ammon and showed up in the field to open a second front from the north. This could have been an absolute disaster had it not been for Yoav's quick thinking, bravery, and incredible display of bitachon in Hashem. Yoav is often portrayed throughout the Sefer as the problem, although, as Rav Bazak points out, in a sense, he appears more positively when David HaMelech is shown at a lower point, meaning the two kind of balance each other out. There are many times where I see people who are meant to work together, whether partners or spouses, who can't seem to get along because of their differences from one another. From the side, it's just so completely clear that one without the other would be such a disaster. If they could just appreciate each other's strengths and learn to balance out the other's challenges, they would be perfect for one another. The same thing happens with the different segments we often divide ourselves into as a nation. More on that at a later time. One of my favorite, so to speak, scenes is that of Yoav and Avishai figuratively back-to-back fighting off their enemies. Of course, it isn't single-handedly, but they cover each other, with Yoav protecting his brother and taking the greater threat upon himself. They managed to fend off the enemy, sending them retreating back north, but knowing that this was far from a complete victory and that there would be another round to come soon. They leave Ammon for the moment and go back to Yerushalayim to get ready for round two. This time, they'd be more prepared. But so would Aram. Aram gathers the largest forces it can muster. Hadadezer of Aram Tzova probably thought the previous round with its surprise second front would be an easy win, and maybe it would have been without Hashem's help. This time, they amass all of the vassals in the region under their control, the armies of city-states spreading all the way to the Euphrates. David prepares as well. This time, he doesn't leave it just to Yoav and his elite units as a seemingly small operation, but dedicated probably as many soldiers as he can muster without leaving the homeland unprotected, of course, and even joins the troops himself in the field. This time, they cut off the Arameans, farther north by Chelam, not far from the modern border between Syria and Jordan. In this way, Ammon will have to leave the security of their walls if they want to open a second front, but they don't dare. This both helps negate the threat of another attack from the south and maybe also breaks the alliance between Ammon and Aram as they don't come north to help them. When Aram is defeated the second time around, the vassals of Hadadezer realize that David is the stronger power and abandon Hadadezer to align themselves with David, granting him control all the way to the Euphrates. At this point, Aram has been subdued and is probably less inclined to go rescue Ammon anyway. And so, when the time is right, it's time to set out again to lay siege to Ammon. Again, David Melech feels that with the threat of Aram dealt with, he's not needed personally in the field and sends out Yoav and the necessary troops to deal with Ammon. It seems, however, that this may have been a mistake. Perhaps if David had been at war with his troops, he wouldn't have woken in his own bed from the afternoon nap while his soldiers were laying in the field, and the next perek never would have happened.